Welcome to the Encouragement Engineering Podcast. We help people to combat the negativity that inundates their daily lives with a positive perspective and positive action. Today's guest is Don Colliver. Don teaches popular public speaking courses internally at Google and around the world. He leads an improv, clown, and sketch comedy class for Berkeley Rep School of Theater and speaks professionally to Fortune 500 companies. Don has performed with the Blue Man Group, toured internationally as a theatrical clown in contemporary circus, Spiegelworld, and is listed as a Cirque du Soleil performer database. Don's mission is to help every communicator profoundly impact their audience through the power of authenticity, listening, and play, the secret of the clown. He recently released a #1 Amazon new release book entitled Wink, Transforming Public Speaking with Clown Presence, and to help the anxious speaker and organizational teams everywhere connect more deeply when they communicate. So please welcome to the show, Don Colliver. Don, thank you so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate you being here.
All right. Thanks, Bob. Great to be here on your podcast. I love the concept.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And if we can, let's get right into it because, I want to know about you and how you got to, it's an interesting scenario you have. I do a lot of speaking as well, and I love the idea of the combination, if you will, of the clown and the speaking scenario, and we'll get into some of that. But if you can, first tell us about how, what brought you to this?
Yeah. Boy. Well, it was probably, started with pain. I think like a lot of people, you start to find what's really important when you go through trials. And I had a challenging divorce in 2009. And through that, I happened to find improvisational comedy. And it was kind of like a light just turned on because I was kind of at the depths. And then I walked into this intro class and I was like, where's this been all my life? And it was really amazing. And from that moment, I started to make choices based purely on like what feels good, like where's the love? Where can my innate talents be most of service without thinking about making money or anything like that? And that kind of tipped me over into thinking like that, as opposed to what does everybody want? How can I be more what everybody else wants? And so that was kind of the transition point, and lots of things, of course, happened after that. But there you go.
Huh. Well, it's funny you mentioned that, that where has this been? And as you speak, you've probably heard this before, but you kind of look like Jim Carrey.
I get that all the time. Weirdly, I get it more when I'm out of the country. Like people all the time. Like people, I was out to eat one time. I was in Toronto when I was in a Cirque show called Empire, and we were there for a 2-month run. And I was out to eat breakfast with my clown partner. We were the hosts of this big show, and the waiter thought I was Jim Carrey and thought like my partner was my daughter, which was a little bit heartbreaking because we're not that far different in age. But I was like, whoa, it was crazy. I guess it's a compliment. Yes. Yeah, so thanks.
Well, that's something. And, in that realm, if you talk about, the idea of comedy or laughter, if you will, and of course, any type of acting, it brings out all kinds of emotions. And it seemed like that life event, if you will, that took you there, all of a sudden, like you said, you found this, where has this been all my life? It's interesting how that all comes about. Do you, with the idea of clowning and so forth, and people always think, oh, funny thing, make people laugh. How does that integrate into speaking, or does it hide? Can you mask feelings? Tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think first we need to address the creepy clown in the room because
Halloween time. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, I get it. Like Stephen King, terrifying movie, love it. Like everybody is scared of clowns. What I'm talking about is not that. I'm talking about showing up with enough courage that you can be authentic in front of an audience. And that's kind of the secret of theatrical clowns, is they're courageous enough to kind of reveal their true feelings in these moments. And so that's like theatrical clowning. But when it transitions into public speaking or speaking at work, what I'm talking about is simply building up the courage, building up the confidence to reveal your authentic, vulnerable self at times. Because reason being, that really deepens connection. And that is kind of what I brought from clowning into my public speaking classes. Because what I was seeing was, because I'm a old school Toastmaster too. I've done Toastmasters for a long, long time. And I see people like rehearsing to create this facade of flawlessness, perfect gestures, you know. And then, but when I would see people drop that facade for just a moment and be themselves for just a glimmer, you could see the whole audience lean forward like, oh, wow, we just saw the real person up there. That's so interesting. And learning to be confident enough to show that and even leverage it, that's what I'm talking about when I talk about clown presence.
And that's a great point, because I've done Toastmasters. It's been quite a few years since I've been in there now, but I remember getting a review on one of my presentations, and I was talking about, I wanted to make sure I had some of the facts right. And there was that wall of factual information, Bob, you know, but then I brought in information about my kids. And the one thing I remember him saying, he said, when you talk about your kids, you lit up and you totally change. And that's where that real personality comes out. And that's where I think it's exciting, because it doesn't matter what you're speaking about. I'll go into corporate audiences and, you know, they're very technical and it's blah, 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 blah. We're real people. We breathe, we eat, we make noises. Have fun with that and integrate that into what the topic is about. How do you do that for people? Because obviously with a clown, they think, you know, they want to smile, they want to laugh, they want to joke, but you may have information you need to get across. How do you balance the two?
Absolutely. Yeah. I speak when I talk about professional speaking, I speak at trade shows. So primarily for tech companies in Vegas, like I'll do the 7 to 12 minute pitch all day long on the expo floor. I do a lot of cybersecurity companies.
Okay.
And when it comes to the technical stuff, that, like, I don't joke around with. That is a thing I'm utterly prepared up and down. I know that information backwards and forwards. That's one level of my communication. Then there's the human level of my communication. This I can have fun with. So I never joke about my area of expertise. Right. What I joke about is being a human. Like, for example, I'll often start or sprinkle in through these presentations dad jokes.
Oh, yeah.
A dad joke is like a perfect example of clown, because people aren't laughing at the joke. They're laughing at you telling the bad joke.
Right.
And if you can realize that and being like, I'm going to put myself out there to be laughed at for a second, we're going to all laugh together, that will set up that connection. Then I can drop back into what I've prepared and really deliver this important information because we've gotten on the same page. So there was actually a study I like to mention, and it's a little bit complicated, but I'll simplify it. Like, it's called the pratfall effect. This guy in the 60s did a study, and he had two groups of presenters. One group of presenters was super competent, incredibly prepared. The other group of presenters were not that competent. They were checking their notes or stumbling all around. They weren't familiar with their visuals. Both of these groups would, at a certain point, spill their coffee during the presentation, like a human thing. Right. They found that for the competent presenters, the competent presenters that did spill their coffee were actually rated the highest in warmth and likability. Wow. Okay. But the incompetent presenters who spilled their coffee were rated the lowest. So kind of the takeaway is, this only works if you're incredibly prepared. If you spent your time rehearsing, if you know your content backwards and forwards, that's the way to utilize this.
Well, let's get into that, because that was one of the questions I actually had for you too, is preparing. How long should people prepare? Because if you're talking to IT technical people, yeah, it's high high amount of, uh, you know, knowledge. You got to know the information. Um, but if you're talking to a group on a softer subject, if you will, maybe, team dynamics or something different than IT security, how should people prepare? How long?
Well, I mean, there's such a breadth of topics that you can be presenting on. A rule of thumb I use in my classes, I say go for 5 to 7 times, run through without stopping. Like, even if something, just power through even hiccups, do it 5 to 7 times. But two of those times, I like to suggest kind of two wonky preps. One of those times when you're going through, use super huge hand gestures, like close the door, nobody should see you because you're going to look crazy. But like when you're like hitting your points and like get up on your couch, like, we need to change the head count. Like, you'll never ever do this in the real presentation, but it's going to leave a residual of adding more, getting you in your body using gestures.
Right.
The other specific time, same thing, but vocal variety. Again, close the door. Nobody can see unless, maybe your partner is fine because you're going to look crazy. But really use your voice and like speak really softly and speak really loudly and go all around in your vocal variety. Again, you won't do that in your real presentation, but it's going to leave a residual, probably of much greater vocal variety than you would otherwise. This I found incredibly helpful with non-native speakers.
Okay.
Because quite often, I don't want to generalize, but I see a lot of people who get feedback that they speak in a monotone.
Right.
And this rehearsing in this manner, I've found to be really effective in changing that.
And that's a great point, because so many times, and I was listening to some technical presentations the other day, and it was your blah, 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 blah. And I was just like, are you kidding me? I mean, they were even trying to talk between each other on the stage. And it's like, you don't have to have this scripted. It was a husband and his wife. You can't tell me you talk like this at home. It's just, let's be real when we present to audiences. We don't have to go verbatim via a slide. Do you help people to get away from that slide crutch, if you will, in presentations?
Well, I mean, I like to say during pandemic, I sometimes coach and teach for a training group, and they found research somewhere that said you should add engagement every 4 minutes in a virtual presentation, meaning either a hand raise or ask a question or some kind of engagement with the audience. And I think that's a pretty good rule of thumb, even in person, because if you do that, it's going to peel you off of those slides. It's going to get you out to the audience. Even if it's like, anybody ever do this? And then people raise their hands and you keep going. That counts. That's like some kind of engagement. How do you rehearse? Like when you're doing your corporate presentations?
I go over it as if I'm standing in the room. I mean, I don't sit at my desk and read a script or anything like that. I'll jot down, I'll do an outline of main topics I want to hit, and then I'll just put bullet points of the stories I want to tell. So that way I can, that's a piece. If, for instance, I'm speaking again at church this week, but verses of the Bible, you want to make sure you get those right. So I have those in bold, but the stories behind them and things like that, I just have a bullet point, tell about this, and that way I can go off, and it's a natural ability for me to step away from that podium, integrate, if you will, get with the audience and talk to them in hand gestures. And as the excitement goes up, my voice will go up. So I'll practice it just like I'm in the room. That way, when I get there, I'm ready. It doesn't matter. Technical things will always come up. Maybe a microphone won't work or the slides won't work. You got to be ready for that. So I have, printed out copy of what I want to say, and just in case, and I can reference it and I can look at it if I need to. But yeah, I'm the way I practice it is the way I'm going to present it usually. That's
awesome. Yeah. And plus, if you're out there, you leave the podium, you're telling your story, maybe somebody's really nodding. You can even incorporate their nod into the thing. And that really brings people in when you're able to acknowledge what the audience is giving you. That's great.
Yeah. And I love the fact too that, especially in, if you will, like corporate presentations, you watch people come into the room. I love this dynamic. And where do they sit first?
in the back.
Yeah. So I start presentations in the back. It freaks them out. They're going, what are you doing? I'm not supposed to be in the front. I know, but there's all these seats up here, and I got lonely, so I thought I'd come back with you guys. You throw things like that out that I think help, like you said, it engages the people, and then they realize, wow, this guy's really real. He's pretty cool. And then that bonding starts right off the bat.
Well, they found there was a study that I also used, and oh my God, I actually went to the LA Public Library and looked through all this to try to find research to prove this point, because I knew it was true. And I found a study that was done in 2010. It was done in one of those big Bio 101 lectures at college, where it's a huge, almost stadium.
Yeah.
And, hundreds of freshmen and just droning on. And they gave all the freshmen dials of how engaged they were. And they tried different tactics to re-engage the audience. And they found that when the professor would acknowledge something somebody in the audience was doing, not punitively, just like, oh, Bob, it looks like you're really following what I'm talking about. Immediately, the entire audience would become re-engaged. So simply acknowledging something about your audience in the moment will engage the entire audience. Right. And that doesn't mean like, I don't think you're paying attention right now. Not scolding them. I mean, in a fun way.
Yeah. Because people think, oh, well, if he's paying attention to them, they like to be heard. They like to be paid attention to. So maybe he'll focus on me if I do something over here.
Please God, don't call on me. Like,
the student fear. Oh, don't call me. I don't know. That's funny. Now, I found it interesting because the analogy, the thing with the clowns, and you think about this is you're wearing covered, paint, if you will, over your face. If you were to do that, and the way I picture this is you actually going into a presentation with a clown face on, and so. Is that if you will, an artistic forgiveness of nervousness, that you cannot show nervous, or you get a way to hide it or mask it, if you will?
Well, the clown work I did, there was no makeup. Yeah, it was just a heightened version of myself. Of course, Blue Man is different. Blue Man, it's completely. And in Blue Man, essentially, the character is, for the purpose of being more relatable, it's removing anything that may look different than you. Gotcha. So it's boiling the humanity down to a very relatable, neutral kind of mask, if you will. But the kind of clown I'm talking about, there is no makeup, because I'm with you. I think makeup is super creepy. And when I was a kid, and I'd go to Chuck E. Cheese's or something, and there'd be like a person in a full outfit with the head on. That always creeps me out, because I don't, just like you're saying, I don't know what's really going on with them. And I'm talking about the polar 180 opposite of that. Like, remove that so you see what's going on with me.
Now, is that, if you're seeing all that, do you find that value comes out better with teaching what you teach, whether it's technical or non-technical?
Absolutely. Because you're kind of opening up a road to connection to make it easier to connect. In clown terms, it's called complicité. I like to think of it as an analogy. If you start a presentation, you're on two sides of a table and you're talking across to your audience and you're trying to get them to understand something. Once you get this complicité, it's like you've both moved to the same side of the table and you're looking together at the message that you're trying to communicate and working together so you both understand. So you may pivot your message based upon where the audience is at, as opposed to just like a fire hose of information shooting at them. Right.
And that's always, that brings up a good point too, because sometimes there's corporate presentations where these people have to be there. It's a required type thing, and you're in there presenting. To me, that's like starting out with a hostile audience, because none of them want to be there. Everybody's thinking they can be somewhere else using their time better, but you got to give this information in a way that engages them and keeps them, if you will, happy during the time they're with you. And that brings up a good point, because you bring them to the same side of the desk. And I love that analogy. So that you can then work through these things together. How do you help people do that in those type of environments?
Well, I think, have you read Dare to Lead, Brene Brown's book? Well, I recommend it.
Okay.
It's
I'll look it up.
Brene Brown is big. She calls herself a vulnerability researcher, but she navigates in these waters a lot. And I really like what she has to say. But she really made a good point in terms of specifically delivering to a hostile audience or delivering news that your audience doesn't want to hear. And it's about holding the space and basically letting the audience know, like, hey, your feelings are valid. It's okay to be mad. It's okay to be angry. That I can take it. This speech can take it. Your feelings are valid. However, there are some behaviors that are not okay. Your feelings are okay. And making that distinction and being confident enough to hold the space if people don't like you. And that's hard. That's super hard. It's hard for me. It's something I work on all the time. And that's why the first chapter in my book is about personal confidence. And by that, I mean doing the personal work you need to realize that you are enough without requiring validation from your audience, because audiences can smell that. If you need them to like you, they smell it.
That's funny. I'm sorry. I think in pictures, and I could just picture this audience. What's that smell? You know, and it's like a bunch of, hyenas ready to jump on a kill here, That's great. Well, what is, we talked about a little bit of my practice routine and so forth, and you talked about 5 to 7 times for people. When you're preparing for a big speech and so forth, what is your routine so people get, okay, how's the master do it, if you will? What are you doing? Are you, you talk about doing these gestures. Are you doing that? What are some other practice tips you can give for people?
Absolutely. I do that. I do the gesture thing. I do the vocal thing. One thing I do additionally, specifically for trade shows, because the distraction, you can't get a more distracted environment. It's crazy. It's like, especially sometimes 5 to 7 p.m. they roll out the booze things, and then people are drunk, and it's like, oh my God. Then you have hecklers, but it's loud and people are yelling, and so I will. This is weird. I'll go to YouTube. I'll find the longest interview I can. It's like 45-minute, and I'll turn it on. So that's going in the background as I'm delivering. Sometimes I'll have my partner, my girlfriend, she'll be cooking or studying. Right. And I'm like, I'll just be like, look, I'm going to talk to you. You don't have to pay attention. In fact, you can even talk to me back. But I'm going to get through my speech. Yeah. And so she doesn't have to pay attention. And being able to handle people ignoring me, people like throwing things at me still, and maybe pivoting, but still getting back to my track is really helpful too. And over time, I've been able to like lock into that track no matter what's happening.
Great. It's like the Blues Brothers practicing their set, right? In that one bar where they had the chicken wire in front of the stage.
Right.
That's great. And that's an interesting point you talk about, because during trade shows, the cell phone's going off, they're reading something, they're trying to catch up on text, they're doing emails. And that value you have in yourself and your message, I think, is critical to carry with you, because that's what you're trying to get across. You can't control whether somebody's going to accept that or not. As you talk about the practice, that makes you that much more knowledgeable, makes you better on your delivery, on what you're talking about. But it's, you can't control the receiving end. So totally real interesting there. I find it always interesting too, when you talk to these different business groups, that they are so distracted. Sometimes you just, I remember doing a presentation after lunch. And that's always a tough crowd too, because, you get the afternoon nod thing. So I got, I think, 2 pounds of hard candy and had it with me. And as I started to see that, I said, hey, what about this? I just kind of went off topic, started throwing candy around. I mean, I'm hitting people in the head. And they're like, what? Oh, and then you start to see that engagement. People are like, oh, I got to be ready because I might have to duck, but
That's hilarious.
So, have you ever had to go to maybe an organizer and say, hey, can we, set this in a better setting? Obviously you don't, like when you're speaking to colleges and so forth, you usually don't want to do it in the cafeteria or something like that where there's all kinds of distractions. But have you ever gone to an organizer and say, hey, can we get this in a certain setting? And how did that work out?
I haven't. Because I'm more of a voice for hire in terms of marketing stuff. I kind of have to be, I like to think of myself like in those movies where they hire the assassin, the right man for the job. He puts his suitcase in his trunk, he gets in the BMW and drives. Like, I got to be that guy. Like, I step up there, I can handle anything.
Good.
Yeah, because usually they brought me in because of that.
Right.
Otherwise they would have like a sales engineer deliver the thing, because they're already, the sales and marketing department are like, why did we bring this guy in? We knew this stuff. And then after half a day, they're like, oh geez, thank God that guy's here. Because I would be screaming, crying, running out into the hallway by now.
That's funny. Yeah, that's a good point. That's, you do have to, that's a good analogy. Now I can wear a darker suit now the next time I present, I can be that guy. Well, Don, where can people find out more about you, what you're doing? Tell us about your website and all that, so we make sure they get the information.
Sure. Well, I've got a free exercise folks can do if you want to kind of drill your presentation and start to balance that preparation as well as engagement with the audience. It makes you kind of hold both of those things in your hand at the same time. You can grab that PDF if you go to doncolliver.com/engage. That's doncolliver.com/engage. Happy to send it to you. And then my book is called Wink, Transforming Public Speaking with Clown Presence. It's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and on Audible if you're an audiobook person.
Great. Well, we will make sure we put that in the show notes so everybody has an option to get that. So, Don, I want to thank you for being a guest today on the Encouragement Engineering Podcast. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your engagement and your enthusiasm about what you do and keeping it real for us. So thank you so much for today.
Thanks so much, Bob. Keep on engineering encouragement.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Take care.